Hi, I'm Gary, and this is episode 261 of EV Musings, a podcast about renewables, electric vehicles, and things that are interesting to electric vehicle owners. And on the show today, we'll be looking at how much or how little it can cost you to charge an EV if you have home charging. This season of the podcast is sponsored by ZapMap, the go-to app for EV drivers, helping you find and pay for public charging with confidence. So, welcome back to season 14 of the podcast. Happy to have you here if you're returning. Happy to see you if this is your first time listening or watching. And yes, I said watching. So as far as possible, all the episodes this season will be both audio and video for those who'd like to do things that way. If you're listening on the audio, there should be no difference between what you used to hear and what you hear now. And if you're watching on the video, it should sound about the same, but you will get the added benefit, or not, of seeing me and the people with whom I'm talking. Lots in store this season, including episodes on canopies, battery repairs, charger maintenance, WLTP and why it shouldn't be trusted, marketing EVs to potential customers, and lots more. But a major part of this season will be a series of episodes called EV 101. In them, I'll be producing a concise set of episodes that cover all aspects of electric vehicle ownership, right from whether you should get one, who should get one, how to buy or lease them, taking delivery, running an EV, charging an EV, planning long journeys, all that sort of stuff. Now, if you've never even considered an EV, these are the 3 episodes that will make it super easy for you to make that transition, or not if that's appropriate. And I'm really looking forward to putting out those episodes. Once again, I'm going for a mid-season roundtable with a couple of guests and an end-of-season roundtable with 3 guests. Always popular, always interesting. But our main topic of discussion today is home charging costs. We spoke last season about the various ways and means that someone living without a home charger can charge their electric vehicle. We looked at AC charging, rapid charging, co-charging, subscriptions, etc. We also looked at options for people who can charge at home but don't have off-street parking. And that includes quite a large chunk of the potential EV buying population. We talked about things such as bayonet chargers and gully charging, for example. What we didn't cover in that episode was some of the costs and tariffs associated with that. Now, these obviously also apply to people who can park their cars off street and charge from their own wall box at home. Today, I want to look in a little more detail at the options available for someone who has their own wall box and is looking to reduce their charging costs. As usual, I like to start with a bit of history. There was a point when it was actually cheaper to charge on public charging than it was for me to charge at home. This was about 7 years back prior to the Ukraine invasion, when wholesale electric charges were reasonably low and commercial rates were lower than domestic rates. I've said before on this podcast, I used to charge in public for 9 pence a kilowatt hour with a subscription, which was pre-VAT. And unfortunately, those days are long gone. But home electricity has also risen a lot since then. I have electricity bills from 2019 where the unit price for electricity was 14.3 pence plus VAT per kilowatt hour. 2 years later, that had changed to 14.8 pence per kilowatt hour, and the standard charge had gone from 18 pence a day to 23.8 pence a day. 12 months later, the unit price had gone to 37.94 pence a kilowatt hour, with a standing charge that stayed at 41 pence a day. So some pretty impressive and quite worrying movement. But my situation will probably not match your situation for a number of reasons. Now, one reason is that my tariffs are unique to my supplier and my region. The rate I get living in the southeast will probably be different to the rate my mother gets living in Yorkshire, for example, despite the fact that we're using the same energy supplier. A lot of people like to lock in their tariffs for 12 months or so, and this guarantees that prices won't rise on them until the contract expires. There were some people who put together some really great deals with energy companies, locking them into low energy tariffs over long periods of time. But within the whole sphere of tariffs, there are numerous different variations. There are fixed tariffs, the sort I've just mentioned, and there are time of day tariffs. A time of day tariff gives you one or more windows of time during the day when the rate charged for the electricity used is different. Octopus Go is an example of this. For most of the day, you pay a moderately high tariff for your energy, but for 5 hours between 5:30 and 5:30 in the morning, you get cheap charging. Octopus also does a cozy tariff for this, for heat pumps. And this gives you 3 periods of super cheap electricity between 4 in the morning and 7 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon and 4 in the afternoon, and 10 at night and midnight every day at a tariff that is 51% cheaper than the day rate in your region. But it also gives you a peak rate between 4 and 7 p.m. that is 50% above the day rate in your region. For me, that gives a day rate of 28.74 pence a kilowatt hour, a cheap rate of 14.09 pence a kilowatt hour for those 3 slots during the day, and a peak rate of 43.1 pence a kilowatt hour for 4 hours in the evening. Companies like OVO Energy have an anytime charging tariff which gives you 7 pence a kilowatt hour car charging 24/7. Any other energy used is charged at a standard fixed rate, which is lower than the rate linked to a tariff, for example, from Octopus Energy. The downside to this is that cheap energy is only calculated via the charger, which means you can't use it to power the rest of your house like you can with an Octopus tariff. Variable tariffs need a smart charger installed at your house, and most electricity companies will do this free of charge for you. I did a whole episode on home EV tariffs back in episode 207, the Eco Tariffs episode, where Alex Thwaites from OVO Energy came on and chatted to us about their offerings. Suffice it to say that if you look around, you'll find lots of tariffs and offers that give you cheap home charging alongside certain conditions and criteria. Sometimes the charging is limited in time, sometimes it's limited in scope, and sometimes it's both. And it's up to you to evaluate what's what and make your choice. There's no doubt that being able to charge at home for a comparatively small cost is a great attraction to owning an electric vehicle. In fact, that's one of the things that many people keep throwing up as a barrier for EV adoption. There's the haves and the have-nots when it comes to charging. If you've got a driveway, you're getting much cheaper charging than those who have to use public charging. And on the face of it, that statement is accurate. But I do want to throw in a note of caution when looking at these calculations, and that's this. You're not actually paying 7 pence a kilowatt hour. You're paying more. How much more actually depends on many factors, not all of which are within your control. So let's do a little exercise to explain what I mean. And this is based on something I stumbled upon at the end of last season. It relates to everyone who thinks that home charging is in the region of 7 pence a kilowatt hour. And when you compare that to public charging, which can be anything up to 89 pence a kilowatt hour, it looks really bad. But I'm here to tell you that your home charging isn't 7 pence a kilowatt hour. We've been lulled into a false sense of security by those tariffs. And in the long run, they're untenable. And here's why. Yes, electricity is cheaper overnight at certain times of the year. After all, we've had economy 7 rates for decades before we had EVs. But it was never as cheap as it is now, and the difference was never as big. For me, the overnight cheap tariff is around 75% lower than my peak daytime tariff, and that's a lot more than economy 7 energy is, which is around 25% lower. Renewables and lower energy usage overnight can drop the price down occasionally to a rate that is below zero, meaning you can get paid to charge your car in certain situations. But this should be looked at as a short-term anomaly, not a full-time thing. OVO Energy are offering a 24/7 EV charging rate of 7 pence a kilowatt hour. This obviously must be losing them an amount of money because electricity is not priced at 7 pence a kilowatt hour delivered to your house 24/7. If it was, they could surely add a couple of pence per kilowatt hour profit and offer that as a 24/7 rate for all electricity in your house, not just charging. But they don't. Even the Octopus Energy 7.5 pence a kilowatt hour rate for limited hours in the nighttime cannot be covered by cheap renewable energy every night of the year. Now, there is no way of knowing the exact cost of electricity as supplied by companies like OVO Energy or Octopus Energy. The closest we can do is track the Agile Octopus tariffs over the years to get an approximation of the wholesale rates. For those that don't know, Agile Octopus is a tariff run by Octopus Energy that varies the energy rate or the price for energy every 30 minutes throughout the day. The rates are very closely linked to the wholesale price of energy on the market. Now, obviously, they're not on a one-to-one basis, but if the Agile rate is high, you can pretty much guarantee the wholesale rate is high and vice versa. If you track the Agile Octopus rates, you'll see that they differ considerably across the time period and rarely beat the 7 pence a kilowatt hour rate. In fact, in the 330 days between July the 1st, 2024 and June the 1st, 2025, the daily Agile Octopus comparison rate, which is a weighted average of the day's half-hourly rates, has only been lower than 7.5 pence a kilowatt hour on 4 occasions. It's been up over 30 pence a kilowatt hour average on 17 occasions and over 40 pence a kilowatt hour average on 6 occasions. The average night rate is 18.1 pence a kilowatt hour across the whole of that period, which is 240% higher than the fixed tariff of 7.5 pence a kilowatt hour. Across the whole of 2024, not just the 330 days between mid-24 and mid-25, the comparison rate dipped below 7.5 pence a kilowatt hour on only 8 occasions. It was 25 pence a kilowatt hour or higher on 33 occasions, and the average night rate was 14 pence a kilowatt hour. Now, all the data here come from a site called Agile Buddy, which is linked in the show notes. There are reasons why companies offer these rates, and perhaps I'll put an episode together on them at some point. Now, I also don't want you thinking that I'm against these rates and what companies such as OVO Energy and Octopus Energy and others are doing to promote EV adoption. I'm not. I just want you to know that these rates are artificially low and they won't last forever. They're the equivalent of companies like Tesco offering a buy one, get one free offer on some new foodstuff they want to promote. This low cost is being subsidized or paid for by other means, and it's not necessarily sustainable in the long term. But in the meantime, let's consider that the cheap rates you're getting are an enticement to charge at home. But like many financial benefits of going electric, once the early adopters have been replaced with the mass adopters, these benefits will decrease. It happened with the plug-in car grant, although that's been brought back in a slightly different way recently. It happened with a zero VED rate. It happened with congestion charging exemptions. It will happen with cheap overnight charging, not least because once EVs become the dominant mode of transport in the UK and they all charge overnight, electricity usage will start to peak overnight instead of during the day. Which means, for the purposes of this exercise, the amount you pay for your electricity should be considered to be the unit standard rate, not the off-peak rate. For me, that's about 27.5 pence a kilowatt hour before VAT at 5%. And the VAT is important. We'll come back to it later. There's a quick exercise you can do, and I talked briefly about this last season in the Q&A episode. I calculated how many kilowatt hours per year I charge at home, and I also calculated the annual costs for running my house. For many people, these include mortgage, council taxes, bills that are necessary for actually running the house, not including charging the car, so heating, water, electricity, maintenance, etc. I also amortized the cost of the Zappi charger I had installed over a life of 5 years. This is because something in a fast-moving sector such as smart charging has a limited lifespan. Whether you use it for longer than that or not, 5 years seems like an appropriate length of time to offset the cost of the charger. You could opt to do so over 3 years if you wish, for example. I then divided the energy I used for charging into the overall cost for providing that charge and added the peak rate for my electricity onto that, thereby calculating the cost per kilowatt hour for quote-unquote cheap home charging. Here's how that works in practice. Let's say I charge 2,500 kilowatt hours per year at home. I pick this figure from my charger app. If you can't get that figure, just divide the average annual mileage by the average efficiency of your car, and that'll be about right. I do 10,000 miles per year in a car with an average efficiency of around 4 miles per kilowatt hour, so 2,500 kilowatt hours. So let me take an imaginary EV owner who lives in a house that has no mortgage or rent, and I'll come back to why in a moment. But even with no mortgage or rent, there are still costs associated with living in this house. There's energy costs for heating and running the house. There's water costs for the water and sewage, council tax, maintenance costs for repairs and upkeep, the cost of the charger amortized over 5 years. And we've put some figures in that, and I'm going to be slightly low in figures for reasons that will become obvious. Energy costs $150 a month or $1,800 per year. Water costs $50 per month, $600 a year. Council tax $200 a month, $2,400 a year. Maintenance costs £85 a month or $1,020 a year, and the charger £200 per year. And if I add all these bills up, it comes to £6,020 per year. If I then take the number of kilowatt hours of energy I charge my car in a year, 2,500, and divide it into the cost of actually running that house for a year, 6,020, the marginal cost of every kilowatt hour I charge is £2.40. I then add that to the peak rate cost per kilowatt hour of, in my case, 26 pence a kilowatt hour to come to an actual cost per kilowatt hour for real home charging. And this equates to £2.66 per kilowatt hour. That's using a home VAT rate of 5%. If the price for home electricity included 20% VAT, my costs would rise to £2.69 per kilowatt hour. Remember, this applies to not only the electricity I use for charging, but my total home electricity tariff. That seems like an incredibly high number, right? The irony is that even if you use the 7.5 pence kilowatt hour rate from Octopus Energy, it's not going to make a great deal of difference to the overall amount. It's still above £2.45 kilowatt hour. I also want to remind you that I have not accounted for anything such as mortgage or rental payments, which in an accurate calculation would also need to be included in here. Now, at this point, I want to add a caveat here because people are going to be screaming at me as they listen to this. I am not saying that you individually are paying around £2.60 a kilowatt hour for your home charging, for example. What I am saying is that if you want to compare the price of home charging with the price of public charging, you must compare them on a like-for-like basis. This means doing exactly what the CPOs do and include the costs of installation, maintenance, support, etc. Now, many people do a simple comparison. My cheap energy tariff is this, the price CPOs charge for providing a complete infrastructure build is that, and say the difference is huge. But it's not a like-for-like comparison. It's like comparing the price of a cup of coffee made at home with a Starbucks coffee. It's always going to be cheaper at home because you never include the same things. Do you have the big Gaggia coffee maker at home? Is the price of that included in your home coffee calculation? What about the grinder? Do you include the cost of electricity to heat the water? Do you include the cost of the milk? Of course you don't. You say, I pay £10 for a bag of coffee, I can get 100 cups from that bag, so my price per cup is 10p. For a homeowner, there are sunken costs that you need to pay regardless of whether you charge a car at home or not. But for CPO, these additional costs are key factors that play into the pricing equation. For an accurate comparison, you have to include them. Caveat over. Now, I would encourage you to do a similar calculation for your house, including your actual mortgage or rent payment to determine what the full real-life cost of your home charging is. It's most certainly not going to come to the 76 pence a kilowatt hour that ZapMap calculates as an average for public rapid charging. But it's certainly going to be a lot more than 1/10 of the price people think it is when they quote the 7 pence a kilowatt hour figure for home charging. Now, when we talk about calculations like this, it's also worth remembering that utilization is key. I said earlier that I charge around 2,500 kilowatt hours per year for my car. If I double the amount of charging that I do in a year, the effective price per kilowatt hour drops to £1.46 from £2.66 at 5% VAT. Now, CPOs are always telling us that increased utilization will equate to decreased costs, and that's why. Now, are there going to be people who look at these figures and say, but those figures don't hold up for me, or I have solar, so the figures are different in my case? Absolutely, yes, there are. But that doesn't mean the calculation is wrong, merely that it doesn't apply in your case. Remember, this isn't a calculation meant to show the true charging costs. It's meant to highlight the calculation basis for comparison costs between public and private charging. There are also others, and I can hear Abigail Dombe from Brighton screaming, I have to pay these same costs for my house in Brighton, and I'm still paying over the odds for charging because I don't have off-street parking. And she's, of course, correct. But even doing the calculation I've included above with bills excluding the mortgage, it's worth remembering that this cost per kilowatt hour is substantially higher than street charging, and that's without the cost of a Brighton rent or mortgage. Remember, the cheap overnight rates we are paying at the moment are subsidized in some way, shape, or form by the energy companies. For the proportion of EV drivers that form part of the Octopus Energy customer base, this is something that they can afford to manage. But if every one of Octopus's almost 7 million customers switches to EV and gets a cheap overnight tariff, I would be very surprised if this rate remained at 7.5 pence a kilowatt hour. As I mentioned earlier, I don't believe OVO Energy can support 24/7 EV charging at home at 7 pence a kilowatt hour once their customer base increases. For both OVO and Octopus Energy, there will be times during the year when this tariff will work for them. There will also be times when it won't. The question is, how long before they have to change the tariffs? For this reason, I think it's not a useful comparison to look at 7 pence a kilowatt hour for home charging versus 76 pence a kilowatt hour for public rapid charging and compare on that basis. The better calculation is to compare the full cost of charging at home on your day rate with the cost of public charging. Whilst you will be able to take advantage of the cheaper charging in the short term, it's not going to last. Just like the zero VED, just like the plug-in charge grant, just like the London congestion charge exemption for EVs, these things will go away. Be ready for it. Do these numbers surprise you? Do you contest the numbers? Let me know. info@evmusings.com. It's time for a cool EV or renewable thing to share with your listeners. A Swedish crew successfully piloted an electric boat from Spain to North Africa, marking the first intercontinental journey by an electric vessel. The Candela C8 foiled boat completed the trip quickly using significantly less energy and cutting emissions compared to traditional ferries. This achievement demonstrates the potential for sustainable and efficient transport across the Mediterranean. It went from Soto Grande, Spain to Quetta, North Africa, a 24 nautical mile trip, in just over an hour, matching the speed of conventional fast ferries. After recharging, the vessel returned to the Spanish mainland the same day. Love this. Electric ferries. The EV Musings podcast is sponsored by ZapMap, the go-to app for EV drivers, helping you find and pay for public charging with confidence. See what charge points are available right now with live availability and unrivaled UK charge point coverage at your fingertips. Pay at thousands of charge points within the app or with the ZapMap charging card. Join over 1 million EV drivers, download ZapMap and charge with confidence. I hope you enjoyed listening to today's show. If you have any thoughts, comments, criticisms or other general messages to pass on to me, I can be reached at info@evmusings.com. On the socials, I'm on Blue Sky at evmusings.bsky.social. I'm also on Instagram at EV Musings, where I post short videos and podcast extracts regularly. Why not follow me there? Thanks to everyone who supports me through Patreon on a monthly basis and through coffee.com at an ad hoc one. If you enjoyed this episode, why not buy me a coffee? Go to coffee.com/evmusings and you can do just that. ko-fi.com/evmusings takes Apple Pay too. Regular listeners will know about my 2 ebooks, So You've Gone Electric and So You've Gone Renewable. They're 99p each or equivalent and you can get them on Amazon. Check out the links in the show notes for more information, as well as a link to my regular EV Musings newsletter and associated articles. I know you're probably driving or walking or jogging, but if you can remember and you enjoyed this episode, drop a review in iTunes, please, or leave a comment on YouTube. It really helps me out. Thanks. If you've reached this part of the podcast and are still listening, thank you. Why not let me know you've got to this point by messaging me at musingsev.bsky.social with the words, apples, not oranges, please. Hashtag, if you know, nothing else. And thanks as always to my co-founder, Simon. It's another quiet week from him. Thanks for listening. Bye.